What's up everybody, how's it going? It's Burke aka Dansgway here, and I have a little bit of a different video for you guys today because there was a huge survey done in Japan about Final Fantasy where they asked people what was their favourite game, what was their favourite character, what was their favourite OST track, and what was their favourite boss slash summon. And the results are quite interesting. So I wanted to share this because a lot of people have been sending me links to this and wanting to talk to me about it. So I thought I'd kind of show you guys as well in case you weren't aware, and we can take a look at some of the results. So it was done by the Japanese state TV NHK, and apparently the survey had about 500,000 fans of the game that voted. So that's a pretty big sample size. So I mean, it's a survey that we should be taking pretty seriously, at least in terms of the Japanese audience of the game. So of course, you know, Japanese culture, opinions, standards are going to be a little bit different to the rest of the world, but it's a very interesting and cool survey to have a look at. So before I go into the results, a few interesting things here. So it's a pretty even split. It's about as even as you can get between men and women. So 51% of the respondents were men and 49% women. 4.7% of the respondents were under the age of 19. 27.3% were between 20 and 29. 44.5% were between 30 and 39. And about 20% were between 40 and 49. And not only that, 3.6% of them were between 50 and 59, and 0.5% were over 60. So that's really cool. So we have a pretty cool spread here. I mean, the number of people who are 19 or younger who voted is almost the same as the number of people who are 50 to 59. So that's a really cool, interesting spread for this survey. So let's have a look at the actual results. And there's a reason why I decided to make a video on this as well, because when we have a look at the official results in terms of the favorite game, Final Fantasy X won. So I was actually really surprised at this. Final Fantasy X came at the top of the list. So let's have a quick run through. We've got Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy IX, 14, 5, 8, 4, 11 in 9th place, and Final Fantasy 15 in 10th place. Interesting. So that's the top 10. Because there's like 13 each list, I don't want to like read out every single one, but I will be scrolling through so you can get a look at the entire list. But it's definitely interesting indeed. I mean, there's some in here which are a little bit surprising, and some of them which are not. The first surprise to me is the fact that Final Fantasy X won in the first place. I mean, I would have expected Final Fantasy VII to win, because again, if you look at a lot of the respondents, they're a little bit older. Final Fantasy VII is just so huge and so iconic. You got the remake hype happening as well, so I really thought Final Fantasy VII, you know, with everything that goes with it, you got like your Advent Children, the Crisis Core, and all this kind of stuff. But Final Fantasy X beat it out into first place, which I thought was really cool. So that's the first interesting thing that I noticed, of course. And as, of course, a Final Fantasy X guy, I am extremely happy to see that Final Fantasy X won in this survey. Now, another interesting one, and another one that I'm actually really happy about, is the fact that Final Fantasy VI is in 3rd place. Now, this is a Final Fantasy I haven't played before. It's a Final Fantasy that's coming onto the channel in 2020, and I've always said that I've heard nothing but good things about Final Fantasy VI. I can't say I've chatted to a huge number of people who've played it, but of the ones who have, they've always said really, really good things about it. So the fact that it made it up this far in the all-time list for these people that voted is another good sign that Final Fantasy VI is going to be a really good game. So really looking forward to that one. And again, the fact that a lot of the people who responded weren't like in their teens or their early 20s, I think helped games like Final Fantasy VI show a presence in this survey as well. Final Fantasy IX, of course, very well loved. I mean, that didn't surprise me at all. Final Fantasy VIII still makes it top 10, but is beaten out by Final Fantasy V, which is also interesting. So yeah, I mean, the older games are pretty well represented here. I mean, Final Fantasy IV, 5, and 6 all make it into the top 10, which I thought was pretty cool, and that bodes well for like me moving forward to play these games in the future. So that was pretty nice to see. So of the most recent Final Fantasy titles, and when I say most recent, I mean Final Fantasy 12 itself was like 14 years ago, but if we look at 12, 13, and 15, I would personally rank them Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy 12, Final Fantasy 15, and according to the Japanese voters here, Final Fantasy 15 came out on top by probably a noticeable margin. I mean, if it's 4 places higher, then that's pretty noticeable. So 15 came out on top and made it into the top 10. Final Fantasy 13 was in 14th, and Final Fantasy 12 was the lowest of the bunch in 15th. So for those most recent mainline titles, that was pretty interesting. Of course, the multiplayer games are very well represented, especially Final Fantasy 14. And to be honest, I could have thought maybe it was even higher, because there's just such a huge number of people that's out there loving Final Fantasy 14, and the latest expansions from what I'm hearing are so good that I thought there's a chance it might be even higher than that. But all I know is that Final Fantasy 14, especially for people that have been playing it like the last year or so, I've heard nothing but good things about 14 as well. But 11 being in 9th place did surprise me. That's a pretty interesting result, I have to say. So Final Fantasy 11, even though it seems pretty dead and buried and you don't really hear anyone talk about it much, like I don't hear that many people say that when it was around it was amazing either. But I guess in Japan maybe like the feeling about 11 was different. A lot more people played it there. So it made it into the top 10. So moving through, there's a few, of course, like non-numbered titles here as well. So Tactics makes it to 11th. Tactics is quite a big favourite as well. And that's one I'd love to play someday once I'm done with like the mainline titles. Crisis Core is top 15, which is cool. Type 0, which is my least favourite Final Fantasy experience so far, is down in 16th. But it's still, I guess, on the list. I mean, so a lot of people did like Type 0 as well. And I think maybe if you played it when it came out on PSP like the first time, maybe like relative to other experiences you could have on the PSP and stuff, it must have been really good. But because I played it when the PS3 port was out, so I played it as like a proper, big console experience. It just really never did it for me, Final Fantasy Type 0. So the fact that it's still 16th is pretty cool. 10-2 and Lightning Returns are probably the ones I'm a bit disappointed about, because 10-2, of course, I mean, when you look up at the fact that Final Fantasy X won the entire thing, I would have thought just for the fact that I love Final Fantasy X so much, Final Fantasy X-2 would have still got a little more love. I mean, I wasn't expecting it to be like 6th, but I thought maybe it would be around like the Final Fantasy 13 kind of range, so maybe like 5 places higher, something like that. But no, it's down in 19th, and Lightning Returns is 21st. Final Fantasy 13-2 didn't even make the list. Oh wait, it did make the list, it's in 28th place. So interestingly, when I finished my Final Fantasy 13 trilogy walkthroughs, I ranked them as Final Fantasy 13, Final Fantasy Lightning Returns, and 13-2, and this survey has them ranked in the same way. So it's kind of nice that it mirrored my opinion on it. But of course, for me personally, because I've played less, obviously there's already 30 titles here, and I've probably not even played even half of them. So by that virtue, obviously my ranking would have put them a little bit higher probably. But I guess it's still cool to see that they rank them the same way that I did. So yeah, I mean, that's what I'm seeing here. Where is... I'm looking for World of Final Fantasy. Like, I'm just thinking, does it not make this list because of some other criteria? But I don't think it's there. Interesting. Yeah, because I had a lot of people tell me about World of Final Fantasy, and I would have thought it would have made this list, but it's not here. Oh yeah, the final thing I wanted to comment on was the fact that I think Mevius, this is on Google Translate right now, but I think Mevius Final Fantasy should be Mobius, the mobile game. And I think from what I'd heard, mobile gaming is still very big in Japan, and they really love like the mobile Final Fantasy titles and that kind of stuff. So for that reason, even Mobius Final Fantasy is above even Lightning Returns or something like that. So it's never the kind of thing that I was into, but I know a very small number of people who do play Mobius Final Fantasy, and of course they enjoy it, but I was still a little bit surprised to see it very close to, let's say, 10-2 or above Final Fantasy 13-3, but it's there. So that is the list of the mainline titles. Of course, anything that I'm talking about here, feel free to share your opinions and your lists here, like what you were surprised about, what you were pleasantly surprised about, what you were frustrated about. But I think trying to put it into the context of it being Japan, I think for the top 10 list, I mean, I can't argue too much. The fact that you could swap 10 and 7 around, I mean, if 10 was second and 7 was first, I wouldn't have like complained or been surprised about it. 9 being very high up doesn't surprise me. 8 is still in the top 10, so that's cool. But maybe only Final Fantasy 15 being this high was probably one that surprised me a little bit. And of course, Final Fantasy 11 being in 9th. But that's the breakdown for the series. Now let's have a look at character, which is a very interesting one. Okay, here we go. So first place, we have Cloud. Second, Yuna. Third, Aerith. Fourth, Vivi. Fifth, Zidane. 6th, Emmett Selch from 14, who I don't know, of course. Then we have Tidus, then we have Lightning, Tifa, Zack, Sephiroth, Horshfant, no idea how to pronounce it. Greystone from 14, then we have Noctis from 15, Squall from 8, and Oren to round off the top 15. So, this list, again, the fact that a character from Final Fantasy VII came out on top doesn't surprise me at all. So, fair play. I mean, Cloud being number 1 doesn't surprise me at all. Yuna coming out in second place did surprise me a little bit, because I really thought that the ladies of Final Fantasy VII would do better than Yuna would. Again, for reasons of Final Fantasy VII's just general popularity, the films, well, the film Advent Children, the fact that the remake is happening right now. We've got all of like the remade character models of Tifa and Aerith, and they look really good, and the trailers have been really good and all that stuff. I don't know the exact dates of when the survey was done, but surely it would have been at a time when the remake was being hyped and being advertised and that kind of thing. So I am surprised that Yuna beat out Aerith and Tifa. I mean, Tifa's down in 9th, which surprised me, to be fair. I think Tifa probably does better in the West. Like, that's just my opinion. I have no data to back it up, but I would imagine that Tifa would do better in the West. Because I think in Japan, they probably like their mages a little bit more, like Yuna and Aerith. They're, at least at face value, they're not too dissimilar from one another. They're more like the pretty white magey kind of character, and then you've got like the more badass characters like Lightning and Tifa that are slightly further down in this, which was interesting. So yeah, I mean, Yuna did surprise me a little bit. I expected her to be high up, of course, because it's Final Fantasy X, but probably not second. Vivi, I expected, again, that's one that I could have said Vivi could have been second or third, but fourth is also extremely good, so I think Vivi is around the kind of area that he should be. Zidane surprised me a little bit. I mean, looking back on it, yeah, I like Zidane, but to me he's not like one of the most memorable or like greatest Final Fantasy protagonists, if you ask me. So Zidane being 5th was a little bit interesting. Tidus, I think he done pretty well, because of course Tidus is still a bit of a polarizing character, and it could have gone either way. I mean, a lot of people find him annoying, and that's cool, but again, I think the power of Final Fantasy X and how much people love the game in general supported Tidus' claim to being in the top 10. Lightning was another one that was a little bit like, because from what I knew, like, Lightning is absolutely loved, like, out in Japan. It's like a really, really important character in the Final Fantasy franchise. And 8th is, of course, still a good result, but I expected Lightning to be a little bit higher, maybe, because, I mean, they made 3 games in which 2 of them she was the main protagonist, and one of them she's still heavily featured in the cutscene. So the fact that Square Enix and the developers love Lightning that much, I thought that probably would have reflected a bit more in the audience that actually brought and played the games. But Lightning finds herself in 8th and above Tifa as well, which is interesting in and of itself. Zack is well loved, so Zack makes sense. Sephiroth being 11th was another one that was a bit interesting for me, because Sephiroth is, of course, a very iconic character, one of the most instantly recognizable Final Fantasy characters of all time. I think when someone asked me about this, I said that I reckon it's just because Sephiroth is an antagonist. I mean, if you look at this list, antagonists did a lot worse than protagonists. I mean, looking further down the list, I don't think Caius is in the list. So I think Caius is a really good villain, and he's not in the list at all. So I think villains just by default don't do as well anyway. So if there's a list of best Final Fantasy villains, I'm pretty sure Sephiroth would be a clear winner. But when you have to pit him against all of the heroes of the series, obviously he's not going to do quite as well. So 11th is where Sephiroth lands, and of course he's still the highest, one of the highest ranked. I think, from what I know, Emmett Selch might be a bad guy from 14, but don't quote me on that because I haven't played the game. But I think I remember hearing something about that. But just like of the mainline single player Final Fantasy titles, Sephiroth is the highest ranking bad guy, so it kind of makes sense. Auron, of course, being 15 kind of hurts me a little bit. I mean, because I'm such a huge Auron fan. But looking at it kind of objectively against the main protagonist of games, it's hard to compare Auron to a, let's say, I don't know, Yuna or Lightning or someone like that, because Auron is a side role character, whether I like it or not. So the fact that he's still in the top 15, I think is pretty good. So I can't complain too much about that. And I think someone like Vivi, even though Vivi is also a side character, Vivi is just so universally lovable that having Vivi in 4th, it does make sense. So I'm not going to argue too much with the fact that Auron is down in 15th. Noctis and Squall have kind of similar vibes, so the fact that they're very close to each other does also make sense to me. And just looking further down the list, we have some older characters. And again, I think because of the limitations of the systems and how old the games are, it's probably a little bit more difficult to make iconic characters when your games are like, you know, that they can't have quite the same depth and personality as games that happen later on. So you've got like Terra, Kane, Celes, Locke, and these guys are all like 15th or below. So there seems to be a pattern here of the top 15 almost exclusively containing characters from games from 7 and after, and the rest of them being the older titles. So again, it makes sense to me. For me, I would say the two most surprising characters of the list are Ignis and Balthier, because again, similar kind of vibes. They have great voices, and they're really like well-loved characters. But the fact that they're down in 28th and 29th did surprise me. So I really thought they would have been higher up. I mean, I would have thought Ignis, especially because 15 did pretty well, I would have thought he would have been not too far away from Noctis. So I was expecting top 20 for Ignis and Balthier at least, but they didn't make it there, which did surprise me. So there's lists. I mean, some other names that I obviously am very familiar with from the games that I've played from the channel. Riku in 27th and Laguna in 26th. I bloody love Laguna. I do wish Laguna was higher as well. But Final Fantasy VIII doesn't get a huge amount of love in this survey anyway. I mean, the highest character from 8 is 14th. So the fact that Laguna is 26 doesn't surprise me a huge amount. So that's a deal with the characters. Once again, of course, let me know what you think from the list as well. The bosses and summons. Now, I don't know why they combined bosses and summons. I'm not really sure about that idea, but I'm pretty sure... yeah, I don't like the fact that they've lumped these two together, but there you go. So number 1 is Knights of the Round from Final Fantasy VII. Then we've got Kefka from 6. We've got Hades from 14. Anima from Final Fantasy X. Omega from 5. Who the flip is Warfare? It's from Final Fantasy X, but obviously the original article that I found doesn't have, for some reason, doesn't have the boss list broken down. So I think it's Valifor. Interesting. Braska's Fine Leon in 7th, Bahamut Type 0 from 7, Sildra and Safer Sephiroth from 10. Okay. Final Fantasy X Shiva 11th, Final Fantasy X Bahamut 12. Wow, okay. Ruby Kante, that's probably not even the real name. Tsukiyomi from Final Fantasy 14, Dark Spider, Rare, Odin, Titan, Yzmat in 20th. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the fact that these guys are kind of mixed together is a bit weird, but... whoa. How long is this list? Oh shit, for some reason for these they've got a huge list. There's like 200 characters, but yeah, obviously we're only going to focus on the top. Yeah, I mean, Knights of the Round being like the ultimate favourite summon. Again, hard to argue, is Final Fantasy VII, and Knights of the Round is supremely impressive. Like the first time you see it, it's absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. Kefka, obviously I have no opinion. Hades, no opinion. Anima is... Well, I'm looking at my little Anima figurine right now, so I don't need to be talking about Anima. The channel is literally called Dark Anima Nosphere 2008, so you know what I think about Anima. Omega, no opinion. Valifor being in 6 was really interesting. I mean, all I can say of Valifor is that I think not in terms of like the battle or the look so much, but there were little like cutscene moments where Valifor really shone. Maybe, I mean, that's something I could think about, because the little scenes like when Tidus gets the revelation and Valifor kind of puts her wings around him, and the wedding scene where Yuna jumps off and Valifor saves her, that kind of stuff. I think that gives Valifor much more like human touch compared to some of the other summons, maybe. So that's all I can think of. Braska's Fine Leon, I literally am going to fight Braska's Fine Leon in the P Birdman Final Fantasy X mod soon. For me, iconic, because I played Final Fantasy X so many times. It makes sense to me. I mean, it's a very difficult, memorable boss. You got the Otherworld theme in the background, which is hugely memorable, and I thought it was a cool look as well. So yeah, it works for me. Bahamut in Final Fantasy VII was really cool as well, all the different variants. I don't remember if Type 0 was, or maybe it's not a correct translation here, but yeah, I thought all of the Bahamuts were great. Sildra, no opinion. Sephiroth, yes, absolutely, makes sense. If anything, I would have thought Sephiroth would have been higher. I mean, Valifor being above Sephiroth was a bit odd, but okay. Final Fantasy X Shiva, I mean, Diamond Dust, Finger Snap, enough said. Bahamut from Final Fantasy X is one of my favourite Bahamut iterations. I think he looks absolutely majestic, and the way he just kind of stands there with his arms crossed, it's always just legendary. So I've got respect for the fact that Bahamut has made it into 12th place, the Final Fantasy X one. And then from there, the list just goes on and on and on. But I'm not hugely happy with this list. I mean, they really should have broken it down into summons versus battles themselves, because they're just too hard to compare. Like for me, I can't really. How can you compare Valifor to say for Sephiroth? It doesn't make that much sense to me. But there you go. I mean, that's how they've done it. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but do share with me your favourite bosses and summons, maybe a separate list, like a top 5 or something. And we can talk about those in the comments. Now, the final one, and probably one of the most controversial ones, is going to be the music, because music is always one of these things that's obviously so subjective that it's hard to say. But top of the list is To Zanarkand from Final Fantasy X, which, of course, I'm not going to argue with, even though for me it's not even my favourite track from Final Fantasy X. It is like the headline track of the Final Fantasy X OST, so it makes sense that, considering the fact that it's the favourite game too, and it's just absolutely iconic, like those first like 5 seconds, it just takes you away. I mean, it's just such a great track that, for me, of course, absolutely deserves to be one of the top tracks. Now, Battle of the Big Bridge, again, iconic. So many different iterations of this throughout the Final Fantasy franchise, and that shows you how much they love this track. I mean, it's timeless, Battle of the Big Bridge. So, yeah, okay. So here comes the first of like the what the hell ones. I mean, Eyes on Me being in third was really strange, because Final Fantasy VIII has performed pretty poorly across this entire list. And the fact that Eyes on Me is like the third favourite Final Fantasy OST track of all time was a bit weird for me. Like that, again, that didn't make sense to me at all. I wasn't happy with that. Okay, so fourth place we've got this track called Searching for Friends from Final Fantasy VI, the one I haven't heard, so I can't comment. Fifth place we've got Blinded by Light from Final Fantasy XIII, and I mean, it's nice to see Final Fantasy XIII's OST get some love, because it's really, really good. Probably not my favourite track from the game, but I would have loved to have seen something like Dust to Dust in there, but okay, cool. One Winged Angel from Final Fantasy VII, I was really expecting higher. Again, absolutely iconic track. I mean, I thought it'd be more than that. Eris theme, again, legendary. That I can kind of, yeah, I can go with that. Melodies of Life, Final Fantasy from Final Fantasy IX. So I'm not sure if melody. I mean, I'm assuming that it's called it Melodies of Life here. I'm assuming that's not the same as You're Not Alone. So You're Not Alone is one of my favourite tracks, and Terror from Final Fantasy IX. I love those. So 9th place is the Final Fantasy main theme, fair. And 10th place is Those Who Fight Further from Final Fantasy VII. So, interesting list. I mean, I really wasn't expecting that, to be fair. Only one Final Fantasy X track makes it into the top 10, even though To Zanarkand is first, which I found kind of interesting. So, let me have a deeper look here. The translation I have here is pretty poor. It's just, that's nice. Isn't it wonderful? So, Suteki Dane probably is 11th. That's fine. Another one from 6. Okay, You're Not Alone is 13th, that's not too bad. Somewhere to Return. So Final Fantasy X's Fleeting Dream is 15th, which is nice to see. That's a track that for me is just, it definitely should be up there. But I'm seeing a decent amount of Final Fantasy VI, which is pretty cool, I've got to say. Man with the Machine Gun. I was really hoping Man with the Machine Gun was going to do better than 20th, but again, it's Final Fantasy VIII, but I say that, but then Eyes on Me is in 3rd. So it's a very strange list in that sense, but okay. Otherworld from Final Fantasy X in 23rd. Again, there's a huge amount of tracks here, so going through all of them is very difficult, but Apocalypsis Noctis in 25th. Shadowbringers from Final Fantasy XIV, 24th. Memory of Light and Waves. This was a really, really nice track from Final Fantasy X too. The most memorable OST track. Chocobo Total, 29th place. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, I kind of wish that there was some more Final Fantasy VIII represented here. Like, it's strange because Final Fantasy VIII is kind of represented here, but not in the way I would have expected. Like, for me, something like The Oath from Final Fantasy VIII should have done better, and Man with the Machine Gun should have done better as well. Pretty much nothing from Final Fantasy XII, and I mean, the OST was good. I mean, it definitely was good. But if you asked me to remember a lot of individual tracks in Final Fantasy XII that stuck with me, I probably couldn't do it. So the fact that it didn't appear almost at all here, Final Fantasy XII has got to be the most snubbed game out of the entire list. Like, that's one of the things I'm definitely noticing, I've got to say. Final Fantasy 7, I thought there might be a bit more. Like, where's Cosmo Canyon? I'm not even seeing Cosmo Canyon. I mean, that's interesting too. Final Fantasy 7 feels... One Winged Angel, yes, is there, but the highest Final Fantasy 7 track is in... So Cosmo Canyon not being there is of interest to me. Seymour's battle theme is like down in the 40s somewhere, so that's pretty bad as well. So yeah, for the music, it's a very different kind of list. I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, the fact that Eyes on Me is third is probably still the strangest thing that I've seen on the list, but what can I say? There you go. That is the list, guys, and that was some of the stuff I wanted to share with you. Do let me know your thoughts on these lists and what you agreed with, what you didn't agree with, and let's discuss it in the comments. But of course, overall, I'm very happy that in a vote with 500,000 people in it, that Final Fantasy X got the top game, second favourite character, best OST track, and fourth best boss / summon. So as a Final Fantasy X superfan, I can't really complain about that. So thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you soon. Take care.